This morning, though, people traveling into the U.S. are now under tougher requirements as the Omicron COVID variant spreads worldwide.
As of midnight, travelers will have to show proof of a negative test taken 1 day before their flight. The new rules come during what's expected to be the busiest travel season since the start of the pandemic. More than 40 countries have now confirmed cases of the Omicron variant. In the U.S., more than a dozen states are reporting cases of the new strain. Health officials say they're still trying to learn a lot about the Omicron variant, like how fast it's spreading and how well the vaccines hold up against it.
The question for us here in the United States, now that it is clearly here in at least 15 or more states and in about 40 countries, is what is it going to be as it competes with the very dominant variant Delta?
That's a question on a lot of minds this morning. One we'll ask NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel in a moment. But first, let's go to NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton outside New York's JFK Airport with more on how these new restrictions will work. So, Antonia, good morning. These new rules are coming during a busy time, leaving a lot of travelers scrambling. What are the big changes for foreign travelers right now?
That's right. Good morning, Joe. Look, we are looking at a new travel landscape and some new testing requirements for anyone planning to go abroad in the coming days or weeks. As of 12:01 a.m., if you are in another country and planning to return to the United States, you need to have a negative COVID test result, and it needs to happen within a 1-day window. And that applies to anyone, no matter your citizenship, no matter your vaccination status, and it applies to anyone over 2 years old. Now, that may not sound like a major change. Anyone who's been abroad has already been getting tested in order to come back into the United States. But it's that 1-day window that's really key for people to pay attention to, as not every country has the same testing infrastructure. You know, sometimes in certain countries, a solid PCR test can cost well over $100. And so travelers now really need to think about the logistics of making sure they get these tests done so they can come back to the United States and also take a look at their budget, Joe.
Antonia, I'm curious, are we hearing from folks who are changing their minds about traveling because of the variant or because of these new requirements?
In some cases, this is really frustrating for some folks. I actually spoke to a woman right here just a couple days ago who was on her way to visit family in Bangladesh. And she told me that she's nervous. The last time she was there, she says it was hard to find a quality PCR test that she could ensure was going to come back to her in time. And, some folks are saying they may have to delay travel plans they had dreamed of for the holiday season or in the new year. Just the other day, our colleague Guad Venegas spoke to a woman who is in the midst of travel plans right now, and she was quite frustrated. Take a listen.
It's devastating. It really is. And we booked at the start of this year. So, we've had a huge lead up to it to be let down at the last hurdle, unfortunately.
On the flip side, I've also spoken to folks here who say, look, I put my life on hold for 2 years. In some cases, I haven't seen international family for quite a long time. So no matter what happens with this variant or what the testing requirements are going to be, some people here, Joe, are committed to getting out there.
Yeah, nothing's going to stop them. So, Antonia, for those who chose to go through with their plans, what can they expect once they actually get to the U.S. now?
Once you get back to the United States, you shouldn't see a major change to the customs or arrival process here. But if you are coming through one of the major international airports like JFK or in Newark in New Jersey or, say, Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, you may see a bit of a stepped-up biosurveillance program. A company called ExpressCheck is working with the CDC to start trying to track what we're going to see happen with the Omicron variant. And what that looks like is that they are going to, in some cases, be doing pool testing of samples from passengers coming in from certain international locations to try to keep track of what's happening with this variant and to stay ahead of what we may see in terms of transmissibility in some communities within the United States. But that shouldn't cause a major change for travelers who are themselves just coming back and trying to get back home. It's really that testing piece that people need to plan for right now, Joe.
Antonia Hilton at JFK, thank you.
Let's now bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good morning. Always great to have you. So let's dig in on this a little bit more. So we heard Dr. Fauci mention the fact that Delta variant is still very much the dominant strain in the U.S., but we still don't know what will happen as Omicron keeps spreading. So are doctors learning anything new specifically about this variant at this time? And also, what does it mean for vaccines and boosters?
Yeah, all the right questions, especially going into this travel season. So a couple of things, some hopeful data coming out of South Africa and some other countries that have seen Omicron a little earlier than us, namely that if you've been vaccinated, the symptoms tend to be mild. That's still kind of preliminary. We will likely need to wait several weeks, especially in the United States, to see if these milder cases lead to hospitalizations. But so far, that's good news. Second data point is that it does appear that Omicron tends to be easier to reinfect people who have had coronavirus before, but not necessarily vaccinated. So people with what we would call natural immunity. Again, another sign that gives strength to the value of vaccines, and to your question, Savannah, boosters as well. So I think still more to unpack. We should be getting more and more data in the next days and weeks, but hopeful signs in the beginning.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you a little bit more about what you just said. So South Africa's president also says that their hospitalizations are not increasing as they see this variant spread more. You mentioned the fact that we're seeing people not be hospitalized as much, not have as severe of symptoms. Ultimately, does that seem to point to the fact that this new strain, while it might be potentially highly transmissible, of course, we've seen that it's highly mutated. Does that mean, though, that it might still not have such an impact in terms of symptoms and then therefore severe sickness and hospitalization?
Right. That's the hopeful sign. It's what we would call less virulence. So more easy to infect. And Savannah, there's a kind of a line of thought in biology where that makes sense, right? This is a virus that just wants to reproduce. It doesn't necessarily want to make everyone so sick that they die, because it would like to just continue to stay alive by reproducing in different people. Our vaccines need to fight it. And so far, that's what we're hoping will hold up, including people who are boosted.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Patel, we were just talking about travel. You mentioned it also. Of course, a lot of people were hoping to get to do so this holiday season, to see family, and it felt, like this step towards normalcy. But this variant now seems to be having an impact on that. Obviously, we're seeing these plans change in terms of testing to get back into the country. What's your message to people hoping to get together with family and friends in the coming weeks? I mean, is it still safe to do so?
International travel can be incredibly safe, especially if you're going to a place where you have those kind of logistics or an idea of what the cases are like there. I would not, there's already a World Health Organization warning against people over the age of 60. And I think it's because they're higher risk at potentially getting severe disease. But if you're going to a place that doesn't have a tremendous amount of activity, Delta or Omicron. I got to be honest with you, Savannah. We have pockets of the United States where I wouldn't recommend travel right now because we have such high Omicron activity. So I think about where you're going and think about your health and individual risk assessment, but know that if you're up to date on your vaccinations and that you feel good about your overall health status, I mean, this is a safe time to travel. Airplane travel is incredibly safe. So are other modes of travel, but just be conscious of kind of how to get those testing and logistics done and plan for it.
Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Now the latest on that deadly high school shooting in Michigan. The parents of the teenager accused in the attack were taken into custody after a manhunt this weekend. They're now in the same jail as their son, though the family is isolated, so they're not able to communicate with each other behind bars. Detroit's police chief says the parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley, were found hiding inside this building. They're both charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. With the investigation still ongoing, there are questions this morning about whether charges could be filed against any possible accomplices who may have helped them, or even officials at the school where the shooting happened. NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbella joins us now from Pontiac, Michigan. So, Heidi, both parents pleaded not guilty on all counts over the weekend. Why did the prosecutor decide to charge the suspect's parents in this case, and what are their lawyers saying in response?
Yeah, Joe, these school mass shootings have been part of our national fabric for 20 years now, and it is pretty unusual for the parents also to be charged. But here is why. First of all, according to social media posts, the parents purchased the handgun for their underage son. Secondly, on the day of the shooting, the parents were called to the school by counselors who were very alarmed by a note that they found him scribbling, which read, "Blood everywhere. The thoughts won't stop. Help me." And yet the parents resisted taking him home on the counsel of the counselors. In fact, they left the school without him. So in terms of the arraignment, we didn't hear much of what their defense is. We just heard about why they weren't fleeing and their argument on that. But they are, again, as you said, pleading not guilty to all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
Heidi, authorities are also looking into whether the suspect's parents had any help while they were alleged to be on the run. We should note that Crumbley's attorneys say that they had not fled. They were going to turn themselves in. But what can you tell us about all of that?
Yeah, there is a big question as to whether they were on the run. According to the Detroit police chief, he said there was every indication that they were. They were supposed to show up for arraignment. They did not. There was an intense manhunt, and then they were found in a commercial building in an artist's loft, which we now know belongs to 65-year-old Polish immigrant Andrzej Sikora. Here's a statement from his attorney.
He definitely didn't know that they were fugitives at that point. The minute he found out, he went to the Detroit Police Department and immediately wanted to give them information.
And Mr. Sikora's attorney also said that he has been an upstanding citizen of the Detroit artists community for decades.
And Heidi, here's an interesting development. It's not just the suspect's parents. Investigators say they're also looking into what actions school officials took or perhaps didn't take after they were warned about the suspect's disturbing behavior before the shooting. So could school officials face any charges here?
Well, look, Joe, can't stress enough that this is really a developing investigation. And now there are multiple tracks, right? You've got the parents, the son, the person who potentially helped them. And now the school says it is hiring an outside security consultant to review its best practices, to review exactly what happened in the run-up and who knew what, teachers, parents, the school. And so there are going to be multiple investigations, including the Attorney General as well, who yesterday offered from the state of Michigan to also investigate the situation. But the bottom line is, based on the information that we know right now, it is really important to stress that it is the parents who refused to take Ethan home on the counsel of the school, Joe.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there. I spoke with the Michigan Attorney General about helping out with that investigation, so we'll see if that happens. Heidi Prisbilla, thanks so much for your reporting.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas joins us now here on set. Danny, good to see you. So first, let's pick it up right there with where Heidi just was talking about the parents being charged here. So that is unusual. And I think from any normal person who's hearing the details of this case, you know, you think, okay, it sounds like it makes sense. Social media posts point to the gun being purchased for the son. We know that it was the parents who refused to take him out of school, as Heidi just said. But from a legal standpoint, does the state really have a case against the parents here?
They absolutely have a path to conviction, and I'm only saying that because 3 years ago, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld a similar theory of criminal responsibility based on involuntary manslaughter when a parent let children have access to a firearm with tragic results. So in this state, there is precedent. That doesn't mean that this happens very often. And I wrote a column over the weekend arguing that this may be part of a trend for prosecutors who may want to hold parents closer to automatically liable for what their kids do. That's not what this charge is. This is not a theory of automatic liability. Instead, the prosecutor's alleging that these parents were aware there was a risk and, knowing that there was a risk, consciously disregarded it. That's what gross negligence is. And the reason you don't see this very often is that murder, shootings, killings are committed by one person, and often just people along the way who facilitated that. Maybe they can be charged as accomplices if they had the same intent. But if they didn't, sometimes that independent event is an intervening cause that cuts off causation. So the prosecutor has a path to conviction here, but it is not a slam dunk.
You also wrote in that opinion piece for NBCNews.com that charging the parents in this case may be something that people on both sides of the gun debate can support. Tell us more about why you think that.
I'm a native Michigander. I'm not a gun owner. I'm not a hunter. And that kind of placed me in the minority in the rural town where I grew up. But my friends and their families there, I think, would support charges against these parents. And that's just anecdotal. That's just my observation. And that's because Michigan and Michiganders anticipate that minors will handle guns. Indeed, the legislature anticipates that minors will handle guns. But the prosecutor used a magic word many times in her press conference, and that's responsible gun ownership. Michigan anticipates, and Midwestern states expect, that minors will handle guns to go hunting with their parents and do so responsibly. And that's why I think you might find that a lot of gun owners in Michigan and their kids would be in support of prosecuting irresponsible parents.
Yeah, I think that the way that she put it was essentially that gun ownership is a right, but that comes with responsibility, which I think makes a lot of sense also to your point to the people that live there. All right, Danny, so let's talk about those other people that could potentially be charged as this investigation widens out. So one of the questions is school officials. They obviously saw warning signs. They tried to do something about it. I guess the question is, did they do enough? And then also those parents were hiding out in this warehouse art studio type of space, potentially got help to be staying there. I mean, talk us through who else could be charged or how likely that is and what a case needs to look like against those others.
We'll start with the school. We are just at the beginning of this investigation, which will center on who knew what and when at the school. If they knew there was a threat and if they knew that this child might have access to a gun, then that would weigh in favor of responsibility both civilly and criminally. But on the other hand, consider this, and this may be an unpopular viewpoint, but at the same time, if the only thing that certain school administrators knew was that the child was drawing pictures of guns, or in the state of Michigan, looking up ammunition on his phone, those facts alone might not be enough for a school administrator to say, oh my gosh, suspension, immediate, get him out of here. So, I mean, there are two sides that we have to keep an eye on. As for the person who helped them get into that studio, Michigan does have a law that criminalizes assisting someone if they know that there is an outstanding arrest warrant. So, as you heard in that piece with the attorney of that individual who may have let them into the studio, if he did not know that there was an open warrant out for them and he was just helping them get out of town to get away from all the scrutiny, then there's probably no crime. But what's key is what happened the instant he found out that they were allegedly fugitives.
I'm curious with the school official thing. I was trying to rack my brain to see if I could think of any instance in a past mass shooting, school shooting where that's happened. Does anything come to mind where a school official has been charged in one of these types of cases?
Not that I can think of, and it is a pretty high standard. It's not just, school administrators are not the guarantors of safety, but at the same time, if they have knowledge of something that poses a threat, then they have to act. The key is, what do they know, and what is the probability that what they observed is a threat? I don't know that we want to get to a place where merely drawing a picture of a gun is an automatic suspension, but, it's a difficult thing for school administrators to parse out.
Absolutely. I think it just seems like the more and more details we get, the more stunning some of that is, though, that there was as many signs as there were. Danny Savalas, thank you so much. Great to have you on set. Thanks for walking us through this.
Remembrances are pouring in for former Senator Bob Dole, who died Sunday at the age of 98. A political legend and World War II hero, Dole had been battling lung cancer since February. NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell takes a look back on his life and legacy.
At the U.S. Capitol, the American flag that Bob Dole long served now flies at half-staff in his honor.
At every stage of my life, I've been a witness to the greatness of this country.
Senator, presidential candidate, champion for veterans and people with disabilities.
The disability community is not large, but it's important.
From a Kansas farm to fields of combat, Bob Dole carried grave wounds of World War II through decades of public service, remembered by presidents of both parties. President Biden writing, "May our nation draw upon his legacy of decency, dignity, good humor, and patriotism for all time." Donald Trump called Dole a true patriot. George W. Bush, "I will always remember Bob's salute to my late dad at the Capitol, and now we Bushes salute Bob." From Barack Obama, his sharp wit was matched only by his integrity. And Bill Clinton, who defeated Dole for president in 1996, cited Dole's bipartisanship. "I enjoyed our combat and our cooperation even more." A Republican power broker in the Senate as majority leader, Dole was Gerald Ford's running mate in '76 and sought the presidency himself 3 times.
Tonight I stand before you, tested by adversity, made sensitive by hardship, a fighter by principle, and the most optimistic man in America.
In his 90s, Dole returned to visit every county in Kansas.
It's one time I can say to you that I don't want any of your money.
Known for his dry humor, parodied on Saturday Night Live, father to daughter Robin from his first marriage. Married 46 years to Senator Elizabeth Dole, his partner in life, politics, and advocacy that carried on beyond elective office. Her foundation announced with heavy hearts that Dole had passed in his sleep. He was 98.
So I leave you all tonight with a full heart and a fervent prayer that we'll meet again.
Robert Dole, a son of Kansas, impaired by war, tested by politics, lifted by his commitment to country. Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News.
The Dole Family Foundation said in a statement, quote, at his death at age 98, he had served the United States of America faithfully for 79 years.
Now, this morning, several former Trump administration officials are facing a deadline to appear before the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack. Now, over the course of this week, many far-right figures, including Alex Jones and members of the Proud Boys, will also have to turn over documents or risk being held in contempt. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale is with us this morning with the latest. Ali, good morning. So it's a busy week ahead, as we just laid out for the January 6th committee. Let's start with who's expected to sit for a deposition today and what level of cooperation we're expecting there.
Yeah, Savannah, we're looking at another week of more deadlines, both for depositions and documents to be turned over. On the deposition fronts, we're expecting to hear from former Trump body man Nick Luna, as well as his former national security advisor Michael Flynn. Those depositions, you got to remember, happen behind closed doors. They can also be virtual. At the same time, though, we'll be staked out, making sure that if we can see anyone, we're out there and keeping you up with the latest. On the documents front, again, you laid out who we're expecting to hear from. Some of the names are people like Alex Jones and Roger Stone, right-wing figures who our audience probably knows well. The other names on this list, though, are people who were involved in advancing and preparing the rallies on the Ellipse and on the Hill on January 6th.
Now, the committee also subpoenaed John Eastman. He's an attorney affiliated with former President Trump and a former Department of Justice official, Jeffrey Clark. What's the latest there, Ali?
Yeah, when it comes to Eastman, you have to remember he is one of the Trump lawyers who wrote a memo effectively arguing that then Vice President Mike Pence could overturn the election results. Of course, that's not true, and that's not what Pence did. But Eastman went on to Steve Bannon's War Room podcast over the last few days and said that he's probably not going to comply with the committee's subpoena in terms of he expects to plead the fifth or potentially not show up. He used words like farce to describe the committee's work. So that sort of speaks to the tone and tenor of what's going on with Eastman. And then on the Jeffrey Clark front, he's a former DOJ official. He was supposed to meet with the committee for sort of a second chance on Saturday. He was someone who they had moved forward holding in contempt because he initially wasn't cooperating with the subpoena. And then just before the committee held that vote this week, Clark's attorney said he did want to come in. He wanted to be able to plead the fifth, but then they heard that he had a medical reason for not showing up. So this will come back around in about 2 weeks.
All right, and Ali, we've mentioned Alex Jones, but there are several right-wing figures who are also facing these deadlines to turn documents over to the committee. Tell us some of those big names and what we expect from them in terms of cooperation.
Well, these are, again, people like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the far-right groups who we know had a role to play in the January 6th insurrection. And this is also where the committee's work sort of overlaps with some of the things we've seen from the Department of Justice on this. Some of these far-right leaders are actually already serving jail time for separate but somewhat related crimes. So they are already being prosecuted on the Department of Justice front of this, but now the January 6th committee trying to get the information from them in terms of what their role was potentially regarding the January 6th insurrection.
All right, Ali Vitale, as always, thank you.
Time to get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Michelle Grossman is with us today. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And we are watching it all this morning. We have showers and storms. We have snow. We have frigid air. And we're in some really warm temperatures in the mid-Atlantic. So let's first start with the storms that we're watching. You can clearly see it on the map here, stretching from the Ohio Valley down through the Tennessee Valley, even into the south central states. You see some lightning strikes. So we had some strong storms. And we're going to continue to be watching the potential for those strong storms as we go throughout this Monday. So this is from the Severe Prediction Center. We could see some winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, even an isolated tornado where you see that yellow. So from Jackson to Shreveport into eastern Texas, you could see some of those severe storms later on today. Otherwise, it's windy to the north with the winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. We have a wind advisory where you see the blue, high wind warnings in the purple. That's for Syracuse, Buffalo, and also Erie. So frigid air in place. Look at these temperatures. It feels like 22 below zero in Fargo, 12 degrees in Sioux Falls, feeling like 10 below zero in Minneapolis. So a frigid start. You factor in the winds. It just feels terrible there. Tuesday morning, waking up to temperatures that are similar, 12 degrees in Chicago today, feeling like 1 below zero. Now, in contrast, today in the mid-Atlantic, we're so above normal. We're going to see 60s and 70s, but that's not going to last long. That cold front, that cold air you see to the west, that's going to come our way, and we're looking at temperatures tomorrow, 41 degrees in New York, so a big time drop, 20 degrees drop between Monday and Tuesday in New York, and that's 3 degrees below typical for this time of year. That cold weather is going to stay in place on Tuesday, and that's going to set the stage possibly for some wintry weather on Wednesday. So we'll talk about that. Bill's back tomorrow. He's going to keep you up to date tomorrow and Wednesday with that. Back to you guys.
All right, Mother Nature cranking down the thermostat on us. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.